So good morning, my name's John Peruggia, or JP. You can call me JP, you can call me, just JP. I don't know what else you might want to call me, but I don't know if I'd like that. I'm the Director of Client Relations here at Deccan. They say I'm the newbie because I just officially started last month, but I have a relationship with Deccan going back to 2004 when we began to explore the product, in 2005 when we began to use it in New York. And it was very helpful to me in my role in planning and as EMS chief. So I'm a 30-year veteran of the city of New York. Began my career as an EMT, worked my way up all the way through the ranks. We merged with the fire department in 1996, and that was really good for me because I was promoted every 2 years after that until I retired. Well, I guess it was good, I'm not sure, but and throughout my entire career, since 2005 when we became Deccan users, I've used the product, I love the product. Glad to have the opportunity to work for the company and tell all of you about how fantastic the product is. So today we have a panelist discussion on provider wellness, which is a really important topic in our industry of fire and EMS, and we have some fabulous people joining us. In fire and EMS, our human capital, our firefighters, emergency medical technicians, and paramedics are a critically important asset. And I think you've heard that a few times from some of the outstanding speakers that we've had already. And as such, we as the leaders need to be concerned about their wellness, because without them, we're going to fail our mission. They carry out the mission critical tasks every day, and we need them to be on their game. And it's really our responsibility to make sure that they are on their game. So we're going to seek answers to a number of questions related to provider wellness through our discussion with the panelists who I'm going to introduce in a moment. And hopefully we'll come up with some answers on how we can assess and protect the wellness of our human capital. And at Deccan, we're working on some innovative solutions to allow technology to assist with that we'll talk about. So without any delay, let's introduce and bring up our panel. First, we have Deputy Chief Casey Beal from the Mesa Fire Medical Department. Come on up, Chief Beal. Chief Beal currently serves as the C-Shift Deputy Chief and Shift Commander. He's served with the Mesa Fire Medical Department for the past 19 years, served as the Deputy Chief of the 911 Regional Dispatch Center, and as Deputy Chief overseeing the Technical Service Division. He's a nationally registered paramedic since 2001 and has served every rank with Mesa Fire, firefighter, engineer, captain, battalion chief. Previously to his noteworthy career with Mesa, he worked for Riverside County, California Department, both as a paid on-call firefighter and paid call engineer, as well as a full-time 911 public safety communications officer. So welcome, Chief Beal. I hit the wrong button, so I lost my second person. Here we are. Next, we have Brian Bregnizer, Commander from Austin Travis County EMS. Brian, come on up. There he is. Brian currently serves as Commander assigned to the Emergency Communications Division. He has served with the Austin Travis County EMS for 16 years as a licensed paramedic with over 20 years of experience in EMS. On a daily basis, he's responsible for oversight and deployment of up to 43 ambulances, 7 command vehicles, and multiple single responder units. He's played a crucial role with Austin Travis EMS, leveraging technology to manage deployment and meet response time goals, and more recently has used it to identify crew fatigue. This technology allows Brian to work closely with communication staff and field commanders to coordinate and ensure that responders have adequate periods of downtime while not impacting negatively on providing community service. Our next panelist comes from Prince William County, Battalion Chief Steve Yanarell. Steve's a 25-year veteran with the Prince William County Department of Fire and Rescue, another East Coaster. From Virginia, currently oversees communications and information technology, but was previously Chief of Health and Safety, where he oversaw all facets of occupational safety and health, including a very robust behavioral health program. Steve is also a 20-year member of the department's peer support, previously critical incident stress management team. And last, joining us today on the stage again, Eric Sailors, captain from Sacramento City Fire. As you all should recall from yesterday, Captain Sailors is the winner of the 2015 Outstanding Thesis Award for calculating an amount saved on fires. He's published over 20 articles in the domain of fire service science and data analytics. He's had innovative solutions to age-old problems. After speaking with him last week, I know that I need to have at least 4 hours of good sleep a day, if not more, and I'm working really hard on that. He's a third-generation firefighter with a master's degree from the Naval Postgraduate School, and he's committed to pushing the fire service forward, as I think all of us here are. So let's have one more round of applause for our panel before we get started. So previously in the conference, we've heard from some of our very distinguished speakers how important our responders are, be they firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, even chief officers and supervisors. After all, they are the backbones of our organizations. They are our human capital. And we, the fire and EMS service leaders, have an obligation to protect them, because without them, no matter what we do, we will fail. So today we're going to look at a number of questions on how we can protect this valuable asset, our human capital. We're going to ask questions like, does your organization provide meal or other rest or relief breaks? Is responder physical fatigue really an issue which needs to be addressed? Is responder emotional fatigue or stress an issue that needs to be addressed? And my favorite question is, are labor and management on the same page when it comes to these issues? I've had the opportunity to chat with them in advance on a number of this, and I think you'll all find it very enlightening and interesting on how this question and answer session moves along. So let's drill down and start with question 1. Does your department provide meal or other rest relief breaks? Who wants to be brave before I start picking on anybody?
I'm never afraid of.
Okay, Captain Sailor, sorry.
That's all right. So this is a two-part question, meal, rest, relief. No on the meal side, not formally. We do the best to put ourselves at a service if we've gone for a long time, but we don't have anything in policy. But as you heard yesterday, we do have a standard policy now for rest on the ambulances, right, for the people that are running the 48-hour shifts. And it has become supported so much by the chiefs that it is required. My other two positions are required to follow this policy as well. But it's not really enough because we have some engines and trucks that need it as well. So the question for us in the future is, will we take the next step to look at some of our engines? Because although we have some ambulances that do 7,000 calls a year, we also have some engines and trucks that are doing that as well. And the problem seems to be spreading exponentially each year. So I think that's going to be in the future for us.
So I know, just before we pass the mic, I know that yesterday it indicated that you have a mechanism to track when someone might need that downtime to get their necessary sleep that you guys require. And that's an organizational requirement, correct? So maybe you could just tell us real quickly about that.
Well, I developed something in-house that comes out of our records management system that just does the simple math for me to filter my ambulances to know which ones I need to focus on. So I'm looking at 16 a day, but it's not as predictive as you would think. You would assume that your busiest ambulance never gets any sleep. I needed this piece of software to tell me that sometimes that busiest ambulance does sleep, and my slower ambulance was actually up all night long. We have a diverse enough community that I'll have one ambulance that can do 6 calls after midnight and still get 4 hours of sleep because they're literally across the street from the hospital. I'll have another ambulance that if they do 2 calls after midnight because of drive time, they're wrecked. There is no chance for any sleep. So I needed that software so that I could look at the data each time. It comes out of our records management system, and it's not perfect, and I'm hoping to make a lot of improvements to it through Deccan, through the process, because as we start to expand this thought process into our engines and trucks, we'll need something better.
Great, thanks. Do any of you have a system now where you're required to give breaks, whether it's contractual or some legislative thing? Okay, so as you know from our discussions yesterday with product development, that is a requirement for the stuff we're working on for our Queensland ambulance service. And we have some other places around the country that have brought it to our attention that, hey, we have to give breaks, we're required, and we need help, because if we don't, there's financial penalty. So that's why I had put that in there. Anyone else do anything for rest or relief breaks?
So we don't specifically do any set meal or rest breaks, but we do. We've struggled with this over the years. We know that it's an issue, and so we're looking at it constantly and trying and kind of running different ideas through the paces. Most recently, though, what we've done is we've implemented some software that we use through First Watch that kind of helps look at unit utilization, their actual time on task. Downtime, it's based on whether they're on a 12-hour shift, a 24-hour shift, what time their shift starts, and then the number of calls that they're running within, a certain time frame. It also looks at time since they were last in station, how long they were in station, and based on some very scientific calculations that I cannot figure out myself without much help, it will trigger an alert that goes out to the command staff and lets them know that, hey, this truck needs to be checked on. They'll check with them, see if they do need some downtime, and if they do, they'll work with communications to go ahead and try to get that crew some relief time where they're not going to be on a call. If it's just a break, maybe a nap, or even just time where they're not running calls.
Great. Can I just have a quick show of hands? Does anybody have a requirement currently in their organization where you have to give a break to a crew? Okay. It's coming. It's coming, so we should all prepare for it.
So one thing that I want to say, though, is that what we've learned from that, though, is that this is such an important topic that you can't rely on just a piece of software or your CAD system or things like that to identify when a crew may be fatigued. And so what we've implemented is basically the ability to allow the crews to throw a flag and say, we need a break. And when they throw that flag, they are taken down out of service, no questions asked.
And that's a great point, because no matter how well we monitor what it is our crews are doing, the types of incidents they're on, how long they've been working, how many shifts in a row, everyone is different. So to have an ability for a crew to, hey boss, remember me? I'm wiped out. We need to have that. Which is a great way to get into one of our key questions for today, responder physical fatigue. Now, lots of our professional organizations out there have talked about wellness, fitness, fatigue, sleep, rest, stress. Is responder physical fatigue an issue that needs to be addressed? I think clearly the answer is yes. But let's see what our panelists have to say. Chief Beal.
I can speak to that as far as physical fatigue. And in answering the question, like many departments, we have a fatigue rule. And our fatigue rule is managed in Chronos staffing, telestaff. And currently it's at 84 hours. Now, coming on duty as a shift commander, it's easier to track what the unit activity's been, but you don't know where that person's been prior to you coming on to a set of shifts. We run a 3-4 schedule in the city of Mesa. We looked at going to a 4896. It's been a hot topic. It actually was looked at by, I think 2/3 of our department actually wanted to transition to it. Labor and management somewhat disagreed on that, and depending on which way you're looking at that, they had their reasons, and so did labor. But we're still on the 3-4, which I learned yesterday is how long it takes to get back on that circadian rhythm. But coming on duty, if you have a person who can work a total of 84 hours, we can look, like I said, at the unit status, and we can look at the unit activity, but there's no easy way for me to dashboard somebody's fatigue level and call unless I do some research on my own. And then we currently have no way to weight the acuity of those calls that person might have gone on. So beyond physical fatigue, it's also mental fatigue. I would love to be able to drill it down and have telestaff talk to a program and say that, here's firefighter Smith. They've worked 78 hours. They've been on 7 high acuity calls, and they've been on 30 total calls. That would allow me to be proactive as a manager to reach out to that person when you have an on-duty strength of over 100 in the city. And through peer support and some of the other things we've got going on, that's how that could be addressed. I think if we have those tools as a manager that are proactive, they send notifications, that member feels like one of the things we get talked to you a lot about is just being in touch with our members that are on the streets, because we're not running as many responses as they are. If a battalion chief calls the station and talks to a captain, and then they talk directly to the firefighter, they present them with that information, it feels like that member on that rig is in touch with the person at the top. They care about it, they're intaked. And right now we have systems, multiple systems that hold the data, but we don't have a way to connect those systems, send an alert to our managers to just check in with our firefighters. We'd have to set some parameters, but I think that would address not only the physical fatigue, which we can look at hours, and not only number of calls, but also the acuity calls on a per-person basis rather than a per-unit basis.
Great, thanks. Brian, you were very involved with peer support and critical stress. What do you think about physical fatigue and its impact on our human capital?
So it's huge. And the QD calls absolutely is going to play into physical fatigue. So a crew that runs a very difficult cardiac arrest or some type of rescue call versus 2 or 3 of the general sickness homeless calls that they're throwing on the truck going to the hospital back in service is definitely going to have more of a toll on the wellness, the mental capacity, their physical fatigue, their mental fatigue, and absolutely has to be addressed. But it is one of those things that's very hard to quantify without actually making contact with the crew and talking to them.
All right.
I'll have to say that we're really fortunate in Prince William that our schedule doesn't really cause much fatigue in general, but we do have a rule. So we work a 24-48 with a rotating Kelly day that puts us at 48 hours a week. And we have a rule that you can't work more than 36 hours straight. So I think in that regard, we do pretty well in managing fatigue. But we also have, touching on the peer support programs, and we've had a peer support program for as long as I've worked there, and I know some years before. So we've been very fortunate to have this culture of support within the organization so that not only the individuals feel supported, but also all of the leaders are engaged in this program and understand the value of it. And so that when we do have difficult calls where somebody might be under a lot of stress, it's typically the supervisor or the battalion chief that will check in with the person. We've taught our leaders and members that from the very basic level of things, your best support is there in your work group. They went through the same incident that you did, and they're likely having the same feelings that you are about it. And so that's where we start. And then we can certainly escalate it from there, getting the battalion chief involved, and then maybe calling in peer support counselors just to proactively stop by. And there's certainly the old school mentality where we always put people through a debriefing, and that's sort of fallen out of favor. And there's more of a just a regular support system that we try to keep engaged. We keep all the peers out visiting the stations. We have training programs that they'll introduce, little proactive how-tos of just awareness on alcoholism and depression and all kinds of things like that. We had a rash of suicides in the county public safety organizations, and so we did some training on that too. So I think one of the biggest things about fatigue is awareness, and so that's one of the big things that we've addressed.
And we at Deccan fully believe that awareness is important, because if we could help somehow to identify and make a manager or a dispatcher or a supervisor aware that someone may be suffering from this effect that can impact their ability, then we want to let them know about it. Because I think we've heard already that there's data out there, but we don't have it all in the same place or how to put it all together to help us figure it out. And I think it's great that, there's a program, Brian talked about his program, where they allow the people to wave their hand or wave the flag and say, hey, I need a break. I know in my previous life, I've had discussions, with my management team about giving people breaks and how do we identify it, and that was several years ago. And I know Casey and I had the ability to chat last night for a bit, and people tend to know when they need some downtime, and they sort of figure it out, a way to build it in, but we don't know if that's good enough. Or even if they figure out, do they really have the opportunity to get what's an appropriate amount of time? And I don't know if anyone can answer the appropriate amount of time to fight off fatigue. I know Eric has the sleep program for hours on duty and 4 hours of sleep, and I know I've asked him on more than one occasion, and he gave me that look. Well, you give them the break to get 4 hours of sleep, but how do you know if they're really sleeping? They're not playing Fortnite or Xbox games or something. And, you know, to afford them the opportunity, I think that was your answer, right? You want to expand on that?
Yeah, I can't guarantee somebody's sleeping, but I can at least give them the opportunity to sleep. And after being awake for 24 hours, I'll take the safe assumption they'll go to sleep. If they drink coffee just before I call them, then I adjust, and I try and be as flexible as possible. For example, I'll go through in the morning, and I'll start sending out messages. My plan is Medic 1 and Medic 20 going down in the morning. And Medic 20 may call me back and say, hey, we just had 2 cups of coffee. I say, copy that. I'm here for you. Stop drinking coffee when it gets you after lunch. And if that doesn't work, let me know. I'll keep bumping you back. So I try to give them the safest opportunity as possible. But you're right, there's no guarantee. The best that I have to go off of is the feedback I get from the members after they wake up. And interestingly enough, we've had an amazing culture shift in our fire department where now when the engine and truck captain know that the ambulance is going to sleep, they put themselves AOR so the tones don't go off in the station, and they put the phones on silence. We've had like a complete 180 of being tough to being smart. And now we're learning, all right, we're going to try and keep the station quiet to give them the best opportunity to sleep.
That's great. That's a great idea. That's, you know, very being compassionate, I guess, from the officer on the engine and truck to take into consideration their partners in protecting the public. They know they need a rest time. Well, let's see what we can do to ensure that they have a quality rest time. I think it's great, you know, that Eric, they offer the opportunity to give the break, and I would hope that they took advantage of it. But what's the old adage say? You could lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So the question is, they're considering using a 48-96 shift, and what Eric has described is about getting people that sleep time during the second day. What about the first day?
No, you're absolutely right. I only look at day 2. Morning of day 2 is when I start to look at it to identify my problems. Well, I'm sorry? Well,
that's for 3 slides from now, that discussion.
We actually went to the 48-96 because we couldn't handle the fatigue of the modified Kelly. The modified Kelly was killing us harder than the 48-96. I think the reality is it doesn't matter how you chop up a 56-hour work week. With the call volume we have, the 48-96 honestly is our best option because it takes the 96 hours to reset your circadian rhythm. So you're trading long-term sleep deprivation for short-term sleep deprivation. Honestly, the short-term is better, and if we start to manage it in-house better, will get us through. And I'll be candid with you. Our large problem is call volume. I mean, for a long-time outlook, that's going to be the monster we're going to have to tackle. This is like a short bridge just to keep my people alive. Like I said, I own them till 2050. Put that number in your head. That is a long time.
And you know, some people would say the easy answer for call volume is more units. Most of us will agree more units is not easy for us to get, but for someone else to say. So, you know, we have to make the best sometimes of what we have, and I think by having programs like this to protect those people is really important. Because if we don't protect them, we don't have them. And then we have less units, and it impacts everybody down the line. Which brings us to our next point about monitoring our responders for their wellness, and that's emotional fatigue or stress. Are they even really the same? Is it an issue that needs to be addressed? Like Steve mentioned before, and I'm going to go back to him in a second, you know, we used to be, if you did a bad call or a high acuity call, we would do a debriefing. Maybe somebody came and spoke to you, how you feeling, how's this? Maybe it lasted 10 minutes, maybe it lasted 30 minutes. It's okay, pat you on the back, go do 5 more calls. And hopefully they won't be bad calls. Was that really enough? Was that just a high acuity call that we wanted to worry about? Is it really a problem? Does it impact the responder? Steve?
You're right. It's very difficult to assess that on a regular, ongoing basis. But again, we are counting on our station managers, our supervisors, and battalion chiefs to keep an eye on the overall emotional wellness of each of their members. And in most cases, that simply means having conversations with them. And they don't have to be in-depth conversations about, hey, how's your emotional health? It's really just asking them how their day is and keeping them engaged in conversation, because very often that's how you find out what's going on. And a lot of people will be forthright, and other people are more guarded, so it's harder to get them to where you need to be.
And that's an excellent point, because maybe it's not just the acute call or the really bad call. Maybe it's having a discussion. Maybe they're having financial issues at home. Maybe they're working 2 jobs and it's really stressful. Maybe they're going through a divorce, or they can't have trouble getting to work because their car's broken down. Is it our responsibility to know about that? Some people will say yes, some people will say no, but it impacts their ability to function. Anybody on the panel think about that?
Well, one of the things I think has made a huge difference for us, and I'd be interested to see a show of hands of who does a program like this, but every person that's onboarded, both career and volunteer, goes through a stress management introduction class. And we talk exactly about not only the acute effects of the job and the difficult times you may have, but that there's a cumulative stress. And it not only comes from the job, but it comes from all manners of your life. That people in public safety are subject to greater stresses on a regular basis, and then you have to deal with those things at home. So we do a lot to increase the awareness ahead of time about what the potential pitfalls are, and then tell them that also that their workmates are their support system, and that they can count on each other to help each other. And I think that's where it really starts. And we take it a step further. We have a behavioral health program where we have 2 clinicians that are on our staff, and they're regularly building this program. They've included the police in it and have started their own center in the county. And primarily we use those resources to sort of triage people's issues. So it's voluntary. You're not mandated to go to this, but you can be referred. But in most cases, people are pretty open to it, and the clinicians will give them an assessment, and we'll give them a few sessions, but ultimately, if they determine that this person may need more long-term care, they refer them out to a set of resources that we've vetted, or the clinicians have vetted through processes. It's really quite a remarkable program.
Let's go back to the first thing she said. How about a quick show of hands? Does anyone have a program like this, or considering a program like this? Raise your hands high, don't be shy. Maybe that's 10% of the population in the room. Okay, great. So I'm going to pick on Casey here for a second, because I know that Arizona's the hot weather, but I learned a few weeks ago that it's dry heat, so I guess that doesn't cause stress, but it did to me. What about in Arizona? You guys doing anything to look at emotional stress or emotional fatigue and how it might affect the workforce?
We are, and unfortunately we suffered about 3 weeks ago. We had a suicide in our department, and there has been a lot of resources, and I think a lot of people going back to when you're hired or going into, on an annual basis or a semi-annual basis, you go through these trainings and you have these tools at your disposal, but as things are going along in your department, you're not thinking about these tools. If you're not having these events seem kind of like, criminal mass casualty, all these. We were aware of them, we'll train on them, but then they gather some dust. So when we went through this critical event, we had to go out, and this occurred on one of our 4 days off. So when I came back as a shift commander, obviously meeting with all the crews, the battalion chiefs went out and met with all the crews. We're certainly not crisis counselors, but we are the first. They want to hear from the leadership of the department, and everybody's at the kitchen table, and you're taking a pulse on where everybody's at. So as you go through that program, we took a lot of feedback, and although the programs had been delivered and they'd had some age on them, not everybody had the resources at their fingertips. We had an app called Firestrong. Not everybody had it on their phones. There was a lot of mixed messages depending on how new or how long you've been on the department on what to do and what was available, what was old information, what's new. So we kind of had to reset that. And one of the biggest things of feedback that we got, speaking of professional counseling, is most cities, most jurisdictions have access to EAP. When we went out and talked to everybody to see how everybody's doing, we have peer support, and we have a peer support team. This level, and any time you have a suicide amongst your ranks, exceeds the capacity of even your peer support team, and you don't want to go into a situation that seems foreign through an EAP process for people who've never been. So we brought in professional crisis counselors the very first opportunity we could, made them available, took units out of service, going back to crews self-regulating with either mental or physical fatigue. In our department, we have a really good labor management relationship. I get calls all the time about units wanting to grab lunch or do something like that. But this is one of those things where even through that process, all the way up until the services, we made sure that anybody who wanted to go went. We reached out to our automatic aid partners. For some people, it's cathartic to go to services. For some people, it's cathartic not to go. And so we had to be responsive, non-judgmental. I think the battalion chiefs and all the chief officers and leadership had to walk a very fine line, as anybody would have to do. But we were very receptive to feedback, and it wasn't just, we will listen to you. It's like, we will listen to you, and the very next day, and I had more comments from my staff and my crews saying, it was very nice to talk to you yesterday and see that stuff in motion today. And that was a huge buy-in. I think we've gotten closer after something like this, where in a lot of jurisdictions, you can have something like that tear you apart. And so we do have some programs. We are addressing it, but I think, unfortunately, like most critical events, it resets that bar. But I think it reset it for us in a positive way.
I think, I get to you one second. I think Chief brings an interesting point that, although you might have a peer support team, people might be reluctant to talk to their peers. And every community has resources. I know that we had a peer support team in New York City. It's very robust now, but right after September 11th, clearly that was probably the most critical event ever. We reached out to the Salvation Army and the American Red Cross and even local hospitals, and they sent teams of people down. They helped us develop our behavioral health program, which is in full effect now. So every community has a Red Cross or a Salvation Army or some group that you could tap out to, and it's an outside force or an outside entity that your people might be more comfortable talking to, and they'll be more than willing to help. I would find it very unusual if somebody like that said no. You had a question. So the question is, do departments here utilize chaplain services or the ministry to help with situations? We have a show of hands. That's good. We're at probably about almost 50%. How about up here? Great. All right, Eric, I know you were anxious to add to this.
I'm going to help you unpack the problem space a little bit on this because this is a complex question. I'll break it up into two parts for you, and we tend to acknowledge one part very clearly. That is short-term acute events and then long-term burnout. We tend to focus on short-term acute events, right, where we have a massive impact. We bring everybody in, we talk about it, and there's a little bit of work done there. But the long-term burnout, I think we've ignored largely. And surprisingly, there is a lot of clinical research on this, starting in the 1970s, looking at nurses. You can look up some papers. One of them is titled, When Nurses Start to Hate Their Patients. There's a professor at Berkeley that actually has a program now that will help you identify burnout. It's called the Burnout Inventory. It's a fascinating tool that you can look at your people and see what is causing them to behave oddly. And it's a lot of times not what you would suspect. So not being in control of their destiny is one of the big things that causes long-term burnout. And candidly, I think my agency suffers from that more than anything else. We tend to manage our short-term events, our traumatic events, very well. But it's the person that has been on the job for 15 years that is just done. They are done, and that's the one that behaves erratically. Now, I wish I could remember the professor's name at Berkeley. I've actually spoken with her, but her name is slipping my mind. She's married to the man who did the Stanford prison experiment. Both of them do a lot of cognitive, right? He was one of my professors, right? So they both have done a lot of cognitive research into burnout and how people behave. And I think that is a two-part question to look at. Not only are you handling your short-term events, but also how are you handling the person that is just done and is not behaving well, and are they burned out? And when I say burnout, I don't mean just the word we throw around in there, the true clinical definition of burnout. So I think that for our future, that may be my next project. After I'm done with intentional MCIs, you may see me back here next year with some results. I don't know, but yeah.
Steve?
Eric points out something that's a potential pitfall for a lot of organizations is that person, that fatigue, gets categorized as a behavioral problem that needs to be disciplined. Yes. And sometimes it gets overlooked that there may be true issues that are contributing to this person's behavior that need to be investigated and helped resolved.
That we share responsibility for. I mean, we're disciplining them, but ultimately we put them in an environment that we ignored.
I think it's a great point. You know, when we get someone who's physically fatigued or physically incapable of performing mission-critical tasks, we always manage to find a place for them. Drive the chief, work in the dispatch center, restock, wash vehicles. It's still an important task. They still get paid. We recognize the physical stresses of the job. But when it's an emotional situation and they're burned out and maybe they're acting a little erratic or their partners are beginning to complain, the first step usually is discipline, as opposed to figuring out what can we do to help this person. We've invested time and money in them. They're important to us. So what do we do to help them? So we have a couple of our panelists that have communication center experience, extensive community. One of you guys want to tackle that? And believe me, I agree that our call takers are part of the responders. And I didn't specifically point them out because in many cases they are EMTs, paramedics, or firefighters, and they should be included in our human capital.
So yeah, that's absolutely an area that's underserved as far as getting peer support and the mental health awareness. We've included them in our peer support. Our communication medics are fully credentialed medics. They just are assigned to communications. But our peer support team has members of all ranks included in it. They all go through initial training and then additional training every year with our wellness center psychologist to make sure that they're proficient. Anybody in the department can kind of pull the trigger on peer support. So if someone sees something, it's kind of that see something, say something. That burned out, medic in the field is no different than that burned out comm medic. And so what they do, anybody can call. We have an 800 number that's available 24 hours a day. Somebody's always going to answer that for peer support. They'll do kind of a quick triage of it and then route it out to whoever on that peer support team is going to be the best fit for that person that may be needing help. Maybe nothing more than just a phone call to them to see, hey, how you doing? Somebody was, concerned. We see this, we see that. Is there anything we can do for you? And then if there is, we'll follow through with that and get them set up with EAP or any other services they may need. But yeah, absolutely, the communications has a super high stress level and is an area that is overlooked by a lot of organizations.
Great. And Chief Beal, you're still in charge of that communication section.
Well, I got moved back to operations, but we were lucky enough to take over and become a secondary PSAP, which is something in this day and age doesn't happen very often. So we have full reach back into the comm center with everybody that works with us. I would like to say it's always remembered, but it's sometimes remembered to bring the dispatchers in, especially when we're doing an at-station debrief. And to take it a step further, the comm center is obviously that first line. They're going to be on the line, open line. They're going to be hearing things in the background. They're absorbing all of those experiences that the responders are traveling to. Everything that we're absorbing on the MCT, they're absorbing, with their own ears, and they're trying to put those dots together. But when we have our transport service is private, it's AMR. And our crews care about, you develop a relationship with your private entities as well. And we've had crews say, hey, we've had the AMR unit with us. Do you mind if they attend the station debrief with us on this critical call? And we might have a dispatcher, an AMR unit, AMR supervisor, and the crews all out together. We're trying to capture everybody in that moment. I don't have the ability to, make things happen to that degree with AMR, but I think the acknowledgement that they're part of that team, even though they're a private entity, goes a long way. And the comm center, I think it just, as we get more into that, unfortunately, we have more of these events, we become better at it. But I think at least we've acknowledged all those things. We're working better to make sure everybody's included.
I think it was great that you brought up the dispatchers because they are a vital point in the team. And, you know, to this point, we've really talked about physical fatigue of the responder doing the calls, emotional fatigue or stress of the person doing the calls. But just think about the fact that maybe it's one dispatcher dispatching 10 ambulances, and each of those ambulances does 10 calls, and we're worried about their stress or fatigue, but that dispatcher has spoken to 100 or more people in that same period of time, and what is that impact, and you know, what are we doing? So it's great that, you know, we not forget that part of our workforce, because they are human, they are important to us. Some people would say maybe even more important than the people with the boots on the ground. I'm so afraid to go to the next slide because we toiled whether or not we should even include it, but I think it's important, and I think we've already alluded to it, and that is labor and management. Are labor and management divided, or are they on the same page when it comes to breaks and relief? And I think, you know, we heard from Eric the other day when he was talking about the shift, 48, 96, and, you know, we're giving them breaks because we don't want them to be fatigued and they don't want to lose their schedule. Is that really a big issue? You know, the culture of our workforce is that we're tough. You know, EMS strong, fire strong. We're out there to serve the public, to save lives, to protect property. What do you mean you want me to take a rest and let someone else do my job? That's not acceptable. I always have to be there to do that job. Some people think that management will put the shutters on. If I don't look to figure out that there's a problem, then I'm not responsible to fix it. You know, plausible deniability. Well, where are we with that? Should we be together? Should we be separated? How do we fix it? Is it a problem? Who's going to be the brave one? There you go.
So for us, that was a problem for many years. Suicide is what changed that. When we started seeing staff suicides, things changed drastically for us, and that's when labor management did get together, and we have this culture now that, like I said earlier, you can throw that flag and that goes for anything. It's not just, you know, the field medics, it can be the communications medics. If you're having an issue or you need peer support or you need just a break or downtime, you throw that flag, management has full support of it. If a peer support team member says, you know, I met with such and such crew, that crew needs to go down, that person is taken down, they're paid for their time off, and they go home or they follow up with a you know, psychologist, but peer support has full authority to take a unit and place it out of service and actually take a crew member off. So management's got that. They're backing on that 100% in our organization now, but it did take time and it did take some significant events to get there.
And it's almost sad that we're in the industry to help people and save lives, but often we have to wait for some sentinel, life-changing, critical event to occur within our organization before we say, uh-oh, what are we going to do to fix it? We need to be proactive. You know, for years in our industry, we've had the culture of safety out there. You know, wear your seatbelt, make sure your gear is on, wear gloves, protective PPE. Well, and there's lots of people talking about wellness and fitness initiatives. It's not anything new. Well, it's time for us to start to push the culture of wellness, and that needs to start here at the top. Anybody else want to talk about labor management?
I was fortunate enough to serve on the executive board for our local for 9 years. So I sat in the labor management meetings, and we have a staffing guidelines committee. We have a lot of the things that have established the current fatigue rule, hours that we have. You're always, I think, in battle sometimes between the opportunities for overtime, and you've got the fiscal, which dives into the stress of the member as much as you have something on on the job. So there have been times when I've been approached when we've sent crews home, and maybe not during the time when everybody's around the kitchen table, but myself or my battalion safety officer will get a call and just say, hey, we really appreciate you sending us home. How is that time coded? Because I want to be eligible for overtime tomorrow. And I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that as we are doing these things for our members, we want to make sure we're not doing these things to our members. For some members, it is much more traumatic to have a loss of financial opportunity than it is to deal with the stresses, and they appreciate going home, but they're trying to balance that with their family's needs. And we can get into discussion about that whole overtime and opportunity, and obviously it's our job to provide to the community a safe responder, but we also want to be cognizant of the fact that we're not doing something to somebody who actually we're causing more stress based on their personal situation than somebody else. So I think that's always a balance, and I think that's a conversation that's going to be a forever conversation with labor management, trying to figure out either schedules or how you fatigue somebody out and allow them still to have the overtime opportunities as well.
I think that's an awesome point.
My experience dealing with these two sides on multiple projects is that their fears tend to motivate their responses. So I know that if I can reduce their fears, whatever's scaring them, then I can get them to understand the common good. So through this process for me, the labor was afraid of their shift being at risk. And I knew that I had to come in with a lot of evidence and a lot of reasoning that would reduce that fear. Your shift isn't at risk, the shift isn't a problem. It's a 56-hour work week. For my admin side, their fear was that response times would rise, that they would start to reflect poorly on their coverage. But I knew I had to come in and reduce that fear by saying, look, it's the ALS engine that stops the clock, it's not the ambulance. And now we can start talking about the common good. Because just through basic conflict management, we all know that we're just going to back up until we find a common goal. And as you continue to back up with these two parties, you'll start to rest on the common goal is, I want to keep my people alive. And not a lot of people in the room are going to disagree with that. So for me, it's become a two-part strategy. Predict the fears and reduce the fears through logic and reasoning, and then bring you into a common goal. And now we can move forward.
And I think, if we try to work together, labor and management, it's not something that's impossible. Labor's always going to try to argue against management because that's what they need to do. And management is always going to try to have the upper hand because that's what we think we need to do. But when it comes to protecting the employee or for the union to protect their member, there's a lot of common ground on there. And usually it's just that give and take. Like, hey, we're gonna make you take a break, we're gonna make you go home, but you can still come in tomorrow for overtime. We're not gonna hurt you like that. And that might be the simple enough solution to get everybody together on this topic, which is really, really an important topic. So I was going to start with this slide, and then I opted not to because I wanted us to have some robust discussion about fatigue, emotional or physical, and what it really was and what we were doing about it. But what does responder fitness or wellness really mean? So, you can Google it, and every professional agency associated with our industries has their ideas. But what I think I found worked best for me to use, but fitness relates to the ability of our responder to perform the necessary tasks associated with successfully completing their job. Whether it's dragging the hose, whether it's breaking a window, whether it's placing water on the fire, whether it's carrying a patient down the stairs, or whatever the case might be. Fitness is their ability to do those physical tasks. Wellness, on the other hand, relates to the overall health and well-being of the responder and how that impacts on his or her ability to be fit, but more importantly, to make critical decisions, because that's what our human capital does. They make critical decisions every day, every call, that will often mean life or death, whether it be for the person we're protecting, whether it be for themselves, or for the team that they're working with. So we can't say if they're fit and not well, that's a problem, not a problem, or that they have wellness but not fitness. They need to have both, and we need to ensure that we have programs to give them both. And I think we've heard from our panel that they have lots of different ideas and things that are done to ensure that. Show of hands, how many stations have exercise rooms for their crews? Well, there's a lot of hands in that one. So you know, I started my career in New York in emergency medical service, and then we merged into the fire department. And you know, every firehouse in the city of New York has fitness equipment. EMS stations didn't have it because our ambulances only go to the station to pick up their ambulance, and then they go sit in the comfortable front of that ambulance on a street corner for 8 hours a day. And hear the people complain about why the ambulance is running with the air conditioner on when it's 95 degrees out. But one of the things that I did is I worked with our fitness unit, the fire department fitness unit, and said, hey, we need to come up with some sort of fitness plan for our EMTs and paramedics because they get hurt carrying people. Can't we come up with some simple exercise guidelines and some simple equipment and put it in the station? Maybe they'll use it, maybe they won't. When we built new stations, we built in fitness rooms. So we can say, hey, look, we're treating EMS side of our house the same way as our fire side. And once we did that in 1 or 2 stations, I started getting phone calls from station commanders. Hey, Chief, can we get one of those treadmills or a step machine? Give them the phone number of the guy in charge of the fitness unit because people used to give us all sorts of stuff. Jim was remodeling. All the equipment went to the fire department. Some of it was brand new. Now every EMS station in the city of New York has a fitness room. And it was amazing. I would show up at stations sometimes and see people exercising, coming in early, staying after their shift, had little charts on the wall. And you know, a simple thing like that, just to give them awareness, has a tremendous impact on their ability to do their job and for us to protect them. Because if they get hurt, we're paying them anyway. So might as well try to protect them. So we've heard about some fitness wellness programs and initiatives. How many people here do annual medical exams? I know it's a requirement, but how many people actually do them? So when I was a planning chief, one of the things I was responsible for was redoing the New York City Fire Department's annual medical program. And as much as it's supposed to be annual with a firefighting workforce of 15,000, it's hard to get everybody annually. So we developed what we call the periodic exam program. Within 18 months, we get everybody. And it was a big change, but the union was on board with it. And we worked it out so it wouldn't impact on availability and everything else that was clearly important to every agency. But shortly after it became involved, we had unfortunate firefighter fatality. And the chief came down and says to me, John, I got a really important question. Okay, he goes, we had a firefighter fatality. I said, I'm very aware of it. It's very tragic. He goes, when was that guy's last medical? So we looked up, had his medical 3 months ago. He had a medical issue, died of a heart attack. But they want to see. And that then, for like the first 2 years, anytime we had a fatality, and unfortunately we had a couple of them, that was always the question. And if that had happened 6 months prior to us, I don't know, maybe they had their medical 5 years ago. Maybe they had it when they came on the job and we never did it again. But today you could probably look up 99% of our staff and they've all had a medical within the last 18 months because it's important. And they realize it's important and we realize it's important and we did it. So annual medicals are really important. Availability of facilities and programs for exercise and fitness. We had almost 100%, so I guess we're doing really good there. Professional or peer counseling. Our panelists talked about having it. Hopefully some of us have it, but we've talked about ways that we can get it if we think we need to provide it to our employees. We didn't talk about things like substance abuse or alcohol issues, but that fits into the whole overall wellness, and I think lots of people are doing. You know, in New York, we have a whole smoking cessation program. I think they pay you not to smoke cigarettes. I tried to get them to give me money because I don't smoke cigarettes and said, well, I won't smoke cigarettes, but it didn't work out. But you could try. So a couple of more things. So at Deccan, we're here to help you. We help you decide where your ambulances should be. We help you decide how to move up. We help you make your run cards. How can we help you with fatigue and stress? What can we do to help departments protect their human capital? Well, we have some stuff out there already that helps you. Right? Adam is going to tell you where you need your resources and where they should be. Because if we can't give people breaks, maybe the answer is we need more resources. We can help you figure that out. Live Mom helps you move up people. Smart move-ups. So we're not just moving our people around, making them tired, driving around to cover unnecessarily because we think we need to have a resource somewhere. Yesterday, Roger talked about some products we're working on. Brakeman, Fatigue Manager. And we're looking to work with our clients to identify opportunities on how we can calculate that someone may have physical fatigue. Is it hours worked? Is it particular types of incidents? Is it the impact of the incidents? So that we could develop an algorithm that will sit on top of Live Mom, like we talked about, and say, hey, this guy might need a break. Or maybe the guy throws up a flag and says, I need a break. Yep, he does need a break. How can we best get him a break so that it's worthwhile and it doesn't impact on our ability to serve the public? We're interested in doing that. We're working diligently on it. And any ideas that you have, please bring it to our attention. We would gladly love to interact with you. I'd like to thank our panel because they were awesome. Their thoughts, their understanding, their suggestions. I think we should give them a big round of applause.